everyone, to Our Soft Machine, the podcast on mental health in the everyday. I am Andrew.
I am Sebastian.
Thank you for saying that. You can find us on most everywhere podcasts are available. Reach us with questions, comments, concerns. I can't even read my own handwriting on mine. Questions, comments, concerns. On Twitter, at Our Soft Machine is our handle. So, last week we talked, 2 weeks ago, we talked about illness, which is a kind of a part 2 to our first episode, which was a conversation on mental health. Now, for part 3 of this indefinite series that we call a podcast, for your listening pleasure, coping skills. Right, Sebastian?
I'd like to start with some corrections.
No.
So, in our last episode, it was claimed that you cannot be diagnosed with mania.
That was a bold claim.
Yeah. Apparently you can.
Strictly mania?
Well, I think it has a name.
Which is?
I should have kept that note open for the corrections.
Well, there you go. You're discredited. Now.
Darn.
Onward.
Also, my partner did not
Me?
have... my non-co-host did not have a tendency to bang her head against the wall when she was a child. She wanted me to make that correction. I obviously must have been thinking of somebody else.
Another child?
Yes.
You should introduce her like that to people from now on. My non-co-host.
Yes, coping skills. I was very excited when you announced that this was going to be our topic.
Our topic, yes. It is the soup du jour.
Yeah. And if you guys remember, last time we ended on 50 things to improve the way you live. And it's pretty much going to be us interchangeably just reading all through the 50 methods.
Because, one of these is bound to, work. So,
tell us
here's a guy
how you enjoyed the apricots. Was it apricots?
Yes, the apricot harvest in Warschau Valley in Austria.
Yeah.
Let us know about your trip to Austria. If, in fact, our last episode so encouraged you to go. Unfortunately, you may have been about a month too late.
Yeah.
But, an off-season apricot is still as good as no apricot. Or, wait, no, it's better than no apricot. Look at the positive sides.
Okay, well...
That is one of many coping skills that
go.
we can talk about today. No, but seriously, though, coping skills are something that I think are not easily defined. Like, guess what? Mental health. And illness, and everything else that basically has to do with the mind. It's so unique, it's so personal, and anything and everything can really be a coping skill. Meditation, a lot of people go to that. I personally can't do meditation because it's friggin' hard. True meditation is not easy.
It is. It's not easy to define it. But I had this study that we'll link to, and it's going to be kind of funny that I even linked to it because I'm only using it for this single paragraph that has very little to do with the study. Specifically, has to do with weight criticism during physical activity, coping skills, and reported physical activity in children. And coping with weight criticism and their definitions. So this is from an existing questionnaire called the Children's Coping Strategies Checklist Revision 1, catchy, to measure coping skills for weight criticism during the 3 months of the study. Not that the study took 3 months, but they just had them recall the last 3 months. And it measures 3 types of coping: problem-focused coping, cognitive restructuring, and avoidant coping, which...
That is a mouthful of jargon.
Well, yeah. But, I think it's not too hard to understand those kind of 3 categories of coping skills or coping strategies, which I think will generally, I don't know, I guess it's generally more going to be like positive and negative, really.
I mean, I guess coping skills can essentially boil down to yes, positive, negative, and functional and dysfunctional.
Right. But basically, like, what was really fascinating about this is that you would think something called avoidant coping would generally be a negative coping skill.
Which one?
Avoidant coping?
Never read up on it. Didn't really. No, never mind. There's a joke in there somewhere.
Oh, is there?
I don't know. I always kept away from it. There you go.
Okay, so, okay. Problem-focused coping refers to active efforts to understand the situation and make mental and behavioral strategies to handle the situation when it occurs. Cognitive restructuring refers to mental efforts to think optimistically in the face of the situation, while maintaining a positive outlook and feeling in control. Avoidant coping refers to repression, wishful thinking, and behavioral avoidance of the situation. Which, again, just on that little definition, avoidant coping sounds kind of bad. But it was interesting in their study that even the kids, and these were 5th or 8th graders, even the kids that reported using avoidant coping by their questionnaire standards had better results than kids who, I guess, had no coping skills.
So some are better than none.
Yeah, like you said, even an out-of-season apricot is better than no apricot.
That's going to catch on, I hope.
Of course. It's a saying.
Make it happen, people. Hashtag, oh, not too long of a hashtag.
Hashtag no apricot still good? Wait, no. Wait, some apricot.
Apricots, they suck. I'm going to go ahead and avoid them altogether. No, so like that really speaks to coping skills because again, it's something that generally sounds negative, and that it's funny you bring that up because some of my coping skills may generally sound negative as well. I constantly tell people to say fuck it or fuck 'em or something along the lines of fuck. And you're commonly told that's not exactly productive or proactive language, but I'm someone who likes to use anger as a motivator. And again, that's one thing that generally in the mental health world, anger is a big no-no. I don't see it that way. I see it as I'm spited and I need to like redeem myself or I need to prove someone wrong. And that's not exactly the most functional coping skill, I guess you can say, but it is when I'm feeling bad, something that keeps me motivated to not give up in a way. It's really weird. I don't know. When people piss me off, I sometimes will go out of my way to do something about it. So I end up being unusually proactive.
So you go out of your way to do something about it. Like, what's an example?
Positively. So,
okay.
Yeah, because I know I easily want to go do something destructive.
Yeah.
But no, I know that I need to rechannel this anger into something proactive. And I do it at work all the time. Mm-hmm. Because people piss me off at work all the time or just annoy the shit out of me. But instead of asking why should they be the way they are, or what can I do to retaliate, I ask questions that are like, how can I channel this positively? How can I have a learning moment or an educational lesson or something positive come out of all this anger? So what can I do that will actually prove a point, not drive a point? So I'll do it a lot with a lot of people, and I recently got nicked or dinged on one of my evaluations for not being the most team player or not having the best teamwork. And honestly, that I've been passing it off for most of it when people ask or when I bring it up. But honestly, it does kind of irk me a lot. And I honestly wanted to just initiate an argument right there and then to disprove her and yada yada. But generally, it's probably going to just drive the point that, like, well, this guy is just lashing out. People who lash out don't make for good team players. But I am taking that energy and I'm channeling it into something more productive. So I'm playing almost the long game in showing someone up, I guess. Like, I'll prove you wrong.
In a few weeks.
But no, it starts out that way, but I normally always enjoy the outcome, which is me happy for using that anger as fuel for something proactive rather than, I don't know, a charring ember for destruction. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, because one could argue that, that coping skill could slip into something negative if it becomes an obsessive anger, or even excessive. And so you are, I think it is kind of a defective use of the emotion. And actually that is kind of interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was, I had this article in third place originally, but,
oh, did I move it up?
Yeah, because I mean, what we're talking about is something that can seem negative, but isn't necessarily. So essentially, this is an article, Grief and Negative Coping from whatsyourgrief.com, which why they didn't call it whatthegrief.com, I don't know. I mean, I thought that would have been more fun.
What's your grief? Like, what's your beef?
Oh. That is very good. Okay, so
someone's gonna edit something out.
Yeah. What is negative coping? It's tempting and common to conceptualize negative coping as specific behaviors that are typically thought of as bad or harmful, like what you just said about utilizing the emotion of anger. These behaviors include things like excessive substance abuse, which we will surely talk about, isolation, overeating, procrastination, etc. And what I like about this article, and we'll definitely link to this one, and I highly suggest that you read the whole thing, is later on, he talks about it's better to think of coping skills instead of just inherently positive or inherently negative as basically being on a continuum. Kind of like a lot of things in mental health. Mm-hmm. So like a couple of handy diagrams that he puts here, working. So on one end of the spectrum, not showing up for work, that would be maladaptive.
Right.
And then working 90 hours a week would also be maladaptive. But continuing your 40-hour work week would arguably can be considered adaptive. Mm-hmm. And then socializing, staying in and isolating yourself, not good. Partying every single night, not good. But engaging in your normal social activities, like this thing that you and I have that was scheduled, and my gym appointment this morning that was scheduled. Keeping up with those plans, those schedules, and generally the people that you would normally hang out with, that would be considered adaptive. And
there's something actually, you're saying these things, and, from an outside looking in, if someone were to be doing these things, we can measure that and see that. Yeah. But I can also easily picture the person that we're observing able to rationalize why either end is not maladaptive. Like, oh no, I'm not overworking myself. No, I am showing that I have like drive and ambition. Or if on the other end they're not working enough, it's like, well, I don't really like have that much to do. I'm not really feeling well. I want to just like stay back, or I don't really need that job. I mean, I can definitely see people rationalize both ends.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a footnote that at his examples specifically that, individuals and even different cultures, these things will be taken a different way sometimes. Like I think after a death in some cultures, it might be expected of you to, I think, be in isolation, stay inside the house for like a week or something like that.
Yeah. And I think that's a very common grieving process that we see in a Western culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, speaking from my personal experience, with Mexican culture, we definitely see that side of it, but then we also see a celebration, which again you could argue is even maladaptive, that people aren't really expressing their grief, or they're hiding behind this mask of happiness or celebration. I mean, the trick with all these things is it's going to be the level of mindfulness and rationalization you can put to it, I think.
Yeah, actually, that takes me to what was going to be my second article.
Boom.
Boom,
Knock it down to third.
You're doing it well. This is using coping skills during difficult times and calamities by, and I'm so sorry, I'm going to butcher this, Najwa. I'm just going to turn this over.
Maybe I can pronounce it. Where is it? Oh, God. Najwa Awad?
Najwa Awad is what I was going to go with. I only paused because I couldn't read my own handwriting.
It's typed?
Well, I wrote it down because it's only at the ending.
Anyway.
This was at September 10th of this year. And we'll link to this one as well because I think this one's also fantastic.
By the way, we link all, if
sources,
not most of our sources, so check them out in the descriptions.
And man, we were on that for such a second. I forgot what you reminded me of.
Mindfulness and rationalizing.
Yeah, you're correct. That's what it was. And so in this section under what are coping skills, which is really the introduction to it, I'm going to skip over the first paragraph because, well, actually, no, I won't. So basically, what she says is that one of the myths about coping skills is they are quick fixes to getting rid of sadness, and then they have to be extravagant. I would argue that they are sort of quick fixes, but I mean, her point is basically they're not to be relied on solely. You have to implement it with persistent self-care as well. But what you just said reminds me of this, because she lists pretty mundane things like cooking and hanging out with friends. And so the question comes, then what is the point of doing anything at all during these times? How are these coping skills?
Oh, now we're getting a little nihilistic here.
Well, the way to differentiate routine activities from a coping skill is intentionality and desired effect, is what she said, which I think,
okay.
Yeah, which, I mean, I would argue that, I would agree that it's,
Najwa Awad, your rebuttal?
No, I mean, because when my therapist talks to me about doing stuff, he always says, okay, what are our intentional next steps? Mm-hmm. And so I think the idea of like doing these mundane things, I mean, it's sort of like why a lot of these, I was just reading about a meditation app, and one of its things was like, record your progress, challenge yourself. And I'm like, oh my gosh, really? I'm going to meditate so hard this week. I'm going to beat yesterday or last week. But I mean, I think it speaks to intentionality,
I like how you said that because, so there's a couple of things that come to my mind when I think of coping skills. And the biggest one is mindfulness. And the one that follows close after will be that. And there's this really cool TED Talk, which we will link to, called The Power of Mindfulness, What You Practice Grows Stronger. It's one by a Shauna Shapiro. She's a doctor who draws on modern science and ancient wisdom. Well, I'm reading the description on YouTube. But she talks about meditation in her experience, about not just what inspired her to seek this out, but then her self-defeating mindfulness, where she was practicing a level of mindfulness that was not adaptive. So it was really interesting because the story goes that she was in Thailand, I believe, and she couldn't speak the language until someone came along, and who spoke English, and she expressed to him all this frustration she was having about being unable to meditate, and how she was looking at all the others and feeling like, well, what are they doing any better or any different than I am? And it was really interesting because the person told her, well, what you're practicing is judgment. You're practicing mindfulness in a way that is not intentional, not proactive, and you're losing sight of the real purpose. So one thing he also said to her was, what you practice grows stronger. And I love that phrase. I love that because it's something that I think is so simple and so true, and something that almost forces us to admit also, like, oh, I guess you could say I was practicing judgment or I'm practicing anxiety, whether or not it's intentional. You're doing it by misdirecting your mindfulness to maladaptive areas in your environment or your behaviors. So after she heard that, she thought about mindfulness was not enough. You also had to be intentional, proactive, and basically like problem seeking and creative with your mindfulness in your everyday. After that, things got a little easier for her. But that phrase, what you practice grows stronger, is what stuck with me. Because, I mean, a long time ago, I thought of depression as something that is so selfish and so frustrating, but I couldn't, and I dwelled on it. So what happened was, and I mean, if I'm looking back on it now, which I am, I could say I was practicing it in my everyday by allowing myself to go into that mode, to dwell in it, to live in it. Whereas now I can recognize when I'm kind of slipping back, and I recognize that I have a choice to practice another behavior or another way of thinking. So I'm being mindful about my surroundings, my environment, my symptoms enough so that I can do something proactive about it.
Yeah.
So it's a coping skill that sounds simple enough. Like, hey, just think about it differently, reframe it. But it's one of those things that isn't going to ring true, or even really, like, it'll take someone really the experience and the practice of it to get the gravity of what it can truly mean. So in a way, I guess I'm saying, like, you kind of have to meditate on it. You have to practice it to really understand where that can get you. So
that was a lot of spiritual jargon.
Mindfulness?
Thinking
hard. Is that better?
Yeah, and just as a reference to the last episode's source, and I think this is kind of what you were saying. What you practice grows stronger.
Mm-hmm.
I'll
say that a lot.
Yeah, you can practice things incorrectly,
and yeah, we've talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing that we've already said earlier on is drinking or substance abuse, alcoholism. We don't think of that as necessarily a maladaptive behavior until it becomes one. So we can say that at that point, someone is practicing that incorrectly. Because, you see a lot of people who will go after a drink, after work, or maybe even after something stressful happened. But they're able to monitor that in a functional way, in a way where it's not affecting either their behavior or necessarily their way of thinking. And they can control that aspect of them. But then you have people, who are, and that same person could easily sip a beer for like 2 hours. But then you have a person who will seek out the drink like 4 drinks in 2 hours. Their behavior and their way of thinking changes radically. So they are definitely practicing that incorrectly. And I've definitely been a victim of that myself.
Yeah, like my non-co-host, when she comes home from work, she specifically picks something that's
from her non-podcast job.
From her my non-co-host, when she comes back from her non-podcast, she will specifically pick something that is lower in alcohol content, typically like a cider spritzer. Mm-hmm. No hard liquor, no wine. I mean, if she does, it's very occasional, and she requests I make it with smaller amounts than usual. And she will out loud tell me oh, I'm going to have, I think, one of these after my shower or before I go in or something. So, her behavior in that sense is very intentional. She has a she has a behavior in mind, which is to drink, and a desired effect, which is to become relaxed by it. And she has already decided ahead of time, I'm going to grab one of these cans and drink it. You know, and that's kind of a textbook, like good coping skill. I mean, it's alcohol, but, you know,
not traditionally.
You know,
and not that we're advocating it, but she does practice it well.
Well, yeah, and again, I mean, it's like you said, it's going to be, well, like we're both saying, it's going to be funky because some things traditionally seen as negative, like alcohol or anger, they can be prescribed in ways that make them good coping skills. Mm-hmm. But then when you have someone like me and someone like me, not me.
Like me.
Me. Like me, actually. You know, basically, you know, when there's a difference between that and then in Texas, our liquor stores close at 9, and then going at 8:50 intentionally to get the biggest bottle of whiskey.
So that you have enough for the next day. So, no, really. No, there's this unusual, uncomfortable planning that I have definitely done revolving around these laws that we have because I want to drink.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You know, at the time, I didn't think anything of it. I thought I was being like, oh, I'm a good planner. Like, no, it's very much the opposite. I'm planning to do something negative, something maladaptive, and almost at the inconvenience really at others. Yes, the store closes at 9. Yes, it's technically open at 8:50, but no one's really expected to come in like at 8:50, 8:55, take their time to browse for the biggest thing, and then, you know, keep someone there. But
Speak for yourself. My liquor store was happening at 8:50. What's up, man? I was hoping there would be some concern sometimes that the line wouldn't go through fast enough. But you know, part of it is planning, but definitely part of it is, I think, also like what my therapist will tell me sometimes, which is a pretty common phrase, and that is failure to plan is a plan for failure. Yeah, plan for fail.
Before, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, you know, because there would be times, like, definitely, like, I'd be at home and I lived like right around the block from a liquor store, and I go at 8:50, but there'd be other times I'm just going home and I kind of unconsciously found myself in the parking lot of the liquor store, like, just because it was so habitual, you know, and I hadn't intentionally thought of what I was going to do after work, you know, even if it included alcohol. So definitely, yeah, that coping skill ran into the maladaptive part of the continuum.
So one, and I'm gonna see if I can't twist this or make an argument out of this one, actually, but that was a maladaptive behavior of ours, of a coping skill of planning and falling into this habitual behavior that we don't necessarily notice. So now, looking on the bright side, that's something that is arguably a coping skill. Try and look at the positives. So in this situation, I was able to be someone who planned that ahead. Yes, it was a maladaptive behavior, but I had that skill to plan. So I can make an argument, or at least this might be just rationalizing, like, hey, you have the ability to plan. You're just not using that ability in the right framework. Now imagine if you took that planning, that ability into a more proactive, adaptive form, where, like, what's to stop you instead of from planning that drink, planning that tea instead? Or what's, you know, it's a stretch.
Okay, you know what? I completely know what you mean, and like, it is one of those things where it's like, you know, I think some people, unless you've gone through it, you're going to be like, what the hell are you talking about?
It's a little like playing devil's advocate when you talk about things this way, but I do earnestly believe that there is something there.
Well, when you said planning tea, that's what, like, kind of clicked in my brain. When we started living together, me and my non-co-host, she brought up that idea of, like, hey, so well, actually, maybe my therapist and she jumped on board. But either way, hey, so what if what if you had a plan when you came home? So instead of drinking, we had tea time together. And sounds lame, but we had tea time together. We had tea. So we have a plan for something to drink, plan for something to kind of take up the time and some entertainment, which would be either us interacting or watching a show together. Because a big trigger for me, once I got into that habit of drinking alcohol, believe it or not, I mean, I went through several therapy sessions with my therapist, my girlfriend, like, why do you drink? Why do you drink? Why do you drink? And I felt like a kid again of like, I don't know.
And we had talked about this a little before we started.
Yeah. And then one day it's just like, I was like, at this point in time, I think I just do it because I'm bored. And that's why the tea thing kind of worked so well for me, and again, it was intentional. I had a next step to make and something to look forward to when I got home. And it was, it had a desired effect or outcome, which was to take the place of something, and keep in mind, I mean, this is, again, these are, in talking about coping skills, this, we probably should make this distinction at the beginning of the episode, but we're not talking treatment. So for someone going through alcoholism and then to stop cold turkey, and
it's very dangerous,
probably
actually.
Yeah, it is. You will probably suffer withdrawals, and you do need to seek treatment.
Believe it or not, you can die from alcohol withdrawal. You're more likely to die from that than heroin withdrawal.
Yeah, so
actually, you'll want to die on heroin withdrawal,
right?
But you're not.
So again, I mean, I know this distinction is a bit late, but yeah, coping skills are distinctly different from what would be considered treatment.
And a good word for that would be self-care, actually.
Yeah.
Self-care is, I think, almost a blanket term, the umbrella term for the coping skills that you practice. Because it's going to involve the things that you do that promote your wellness. Hey, there you go. That's actually a good definition for coping skills. So, what is the thing that you do that cares for or nurtures that positive behavior, that adaptive behavior, or reinforces it, or takes away from the maladaptive behavior? When it comes to drinking, yeah, definitely one thing that I did was I had nothing else to do, so I planned because I knew I could. Honestly, that's actually how it worked in my head. I knew I could plan. I liked having things planned because it gave me something to look forward to. It didn't necessarily matter what. And actually, in a way, these podcasts that I do, this and my other podcasts, they're an extension of that, because it puts me in a position to plan, research, and speak about the things that I enjoy. That is my self-care. Hearing myself talk. But truly planning is a self-care for me. Because it's what I do with multiple things, no matter how small. I'll jokingly put things down in my calendar and invite people that are really like mundane, but I find like joy in it. Like, I'll invite you to this podcast, which you already planned days ahead, but it's something that I enjoy doing because it's something that I can see outside of myself.
Invite me to this podcast.
You didn't
accept I co-host this podcast.
You know what I mean. To further prove my point that it's silly. So
earlier, I was going to say that that's also one of my coping skills is listening to your voice.
I'm sure. Would your non-co-host, how would she feel about that?
She's very shrill. She would understand.
So, yeah. I've been told that my voice can soothe nothing. Okay.
So, on the idea of coping skills and self-care, I'm not really going to argue at all whether coping skills and self-care are separate ideas. I think a lot of things in mental health kind of like fall into each other and coping skills can be considered part of ongoing self-care. But I do like this from the article of Miss Awad. The idea that a coping skills is the definition, if you will, quote unquote, of a coping skills are simple ways to make oneself feel better. Vary from I'm reading the wrong part. Coping skills are healthy and moderate strategies individuals use to help calm themselves down when they are overwhelmed with emotion. So I think that's what I think of as coping skills, is like distinct behaviors that I practice, and sometimes every day as part of ongoing self-care, and sometimes in very specific situations. And she brings up later on the example of like journaling. It's
a really common one, yeah.
Yeah, but she says you need to have more than one coping skill. Because
believe it or not, you can get burnt out on your coping skill.
Well, not only that, but situational appropriateness. So probably at work, you can't stop and start journaling for a few suddenly.
Like you can't just go ahead and do it after arguing with your manager.
Dear diary.
About your lack of productivity. What are you doing?
You're doing it again. Yeah, so you want to have a more than one, and for various situations, various times a day, and varying lengths and ease of doing. Not all of them have to be like super simple things. Like arguably like cooking, which is like a whole process, could be a coping skill, and if you take joy in it, if you intentionally choose something like different, challenging, etc. And then even something like, what's something simple?
One for me is phone mobile games.
Oh, yeah.
Or mobile apps that are literally some designed to be therapeutic. So that's definitely something I look at. I used to do that a long time ago more effectively, but with my view of technology changing lately, I've kind of tried to shift away from phones and tablets and screens. But yeah, no, I mean, it's something you can still do that's literally at hand, and you can plug in headphones and escape if you're able to. So, or even just like look up a quick quote to remind yourself of something to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's definitely that they're not necessarily intentionally designed for coping skills. I just like solitaire. Spider solitaire. But
see, I it's funny you say that, because I will tell people that, like, whatever you do that puts you in a state of comfort, and suspends that negative thinking, is meditation in itself. Yeah, it's not the traditional meditation or even the comical meditation you see of people sitting in lotus position, one hand on each knee. But it is meditation in its core, where it is you're practicing a level of mindfulness that is helping you achieve a level of happiness and wellness. That to me is what meditation is. And going back even further, even more simple, I know you have this. You have a paper or a poster of a specific quote that you look at?
Several, actually, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big one for a lot of people. Where I work, they're all over the place, and I hate them.
Okay, by the way, like...
But I don't like cheesy things.
When I first started going to my therapist's office, I used to constantly make fun of them. And he had just started there, actually, because basically the wait time to see any other of the therapists was like months. And then the lady was like, oh, but we have this... I forgot, yeah, we have this new guy starting with us. But, like, you'd be like one of his first... whatever they call me over there.
Wacko?
Yeah. So, is that okay? And I was like, when can I see him? They're like, oh, like next week. Sure. Let's do it.
Hey, even an out-of-season apricot is better than no apricot.
He's ended up being a pretty good apricot. So if you're listening, which he does actually.
You told him about it?
He asked for, he listens to it on YouTube. He's one of our listeners.
Hello.
You're a great apricot. Okay, so, man, what was I saying?
Well, one thing I want to add actually is I think with our conversation on coping skills, we mentioned a few. We definitely haven't mentioned all of them. I don't think it's possible. Actually, just to throw a quick one in, music is something that, like making music is something that would quickly calm me down when I have an especially bad anxiety moment. But it can be quickly overwhelming on the other side, the other spectrum, where like, oh my God, which coping skill is for me? Or why is this coping skill not working for me? Or do I have enough? Or do I have too few? So these are legitimate questions, actually. And there is not going to be a right answer. There's
usually you have too few. You usually want like 3 to 5.
Usually, yeah. But if you have 2 and they work, okay. But switch them up, maybe. So there's no right answer. There may be a less right answer.
Okay.
But what I'm trying to say, though, is I think it's easy to look at it as an opportunity or as an overwhelming situation. But I think it's better to try to reframe it as an opportunity to explore what's out there. And I too tell this to a lot of people, like, you know, if journaling is not the thing for you, well then, have you tried painting, or have you tried even different forms of journaling or writing? Because the way we think about it may not necessarily be the kind of way that works for you.
You know what? That's actually a really good point, because when I first did every attempt I did at journaling, and Najwa Awad here, you know, she talks about the myths of coping skills, and again, one of them is that the main thing is that they have to be extravagant. And so in my mind, for some weird reason, I had this thing that journaling has to be like this, like, kind of like deep, introspective, like reflection, almost meditative or prayer-like look at my day, you know?
Like Sex and the City, Sarah Jessica Parker. Excellent.
I don't know. But
neither do I.
You know,
Doogie Howser.
Once I started, yeah, exactly. Child prodigy over here. Once I started, basically what I changed the method to instead was, I found what worked for me in journaling. And again, I thought journaling didn't work for me for a second there. I found what worked for me in journaling was basically to simplify it. And it was like, what are 3 anxieties I have? What are 3 things that I am grateful for? And then I think I would list, I have to start practicing it again, because it actually was pretty effective. I think it was, also 3 things that I wanted to like do the next day or get done. And so the anxieties and the gratitude, I mean, they both kind of put into perspective my problems once I put them on paper, and also things I can be appreciative for to help with my optimism. And then the next steps were generally like based on what my anxieties were, like, because I could see like, oh, okay, well, this is a big thing in my head. Maybe I could like list something to, but I always kept it to like 3, you know, it didn't become this like overwhelming long list of things. And it was short and sweet. It took me like maybe 3 or 5 minutes.
Huh. So it sounds like you didn't overthink it and you structured it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and again, that's something that may not work for people. Maybe some people need something more free flowing, more introspective. But for me,
you know, one thing I hear a lot is people say, I don't know how to write, or not that they can't, they don't know how, but they don't know how to write well, or like you were describing journaling,
like prose.
Yeah. So it's just I my thing to tell them is always like, well, this isn't going to be for anybody but you.
Yeah.
So what do you want it to look like?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. No one's going to give a shit about you when you die. So just write whatever you want. Draw some butts. You know.
Why not? If that makes you happy, go and draw some butts.
By the way, when you were talking about meditation earlier, and
you were thinking about butts?
So many. But
now you can't think anything about butts. Butts. What were you thinking about when I said...
flustered. Okay, so there's this product on Amazon, and this is actually unrelated to anything we're discussing. Well, it's sort of related. It's called Muse on their Launchpad. It's $200, and it's this thing that kind of looks like dumb headphones that you put on your head, and it purports to like measure your brain waves when you're meditating. And in one of the promotional pictures, they have what you were describing, like traditional, I guess, like monks in robes with this like electrical diode device on them with Apple computers sitting right next to them, next to their little like bowls. So
supposedly measuring their brain waves.
Their brain waves, yeah. So that's just that tickled me earlier. I don't know how I came upon it, but I just wanted to show you it, and I will link to that in our sources.
Yeah, that'd be great. That should go on our Twitter, maybe.
Yeah,
actually,
check it out. No, but getting back to the topic at hand. But all my notes, the rest of my notes are just butts.
But did it make you feel good? Like,
yeah. Who's supposed to be talking at this point? Oh, did you want me to?
Well, I see in your notes you have something about video games.
Oh, yeah, okay, so that one was actually really cool because you kind of said that this was something that you do.
Yeah, well, amongst many things, and actually, video games is the controversial one for some people. I think by now everyone's heard video games cause violence. Blah, blah, blah. I met just about all my friends who are great and supportive through video games. You and I met a lot of our friendship was definitely established through video games.
Yeah.
In the beginning. And
we were incredibly violent.
Yes, we
still are.
As I proceed to punch you, But
ow, my butt.
But video games get a mixed bag. They get a lot of bad rep. And there is something to be said about the level of violence maybe in video games, but not about the causation of it.
Okay, so basically the short version of this conversation is
the clip notes are
is video games cause violence? No, studies show that they do not. However, they have been seen to, I guess, raise aggressive behavior in some kids, but not what would be considered violently aggressive.
Well, at the same time, there have been studies that show even having the presence of a weapon is enough for you to raise your aggression.
Video games are not weapons.
Nope. So, kind of makes the point moot, right?
Yeah.
So, hell, even on hotter days, more murders and crimes are caused on hotter days than on colder days.
Ice cream.
The worst.
Yeah. That's actually a fun thing, but we're just...
For another day.
Yeah, these are just...
We'll do a whole episode on ice cream and why it's so bad for your mental health.
Actually, it's funny because ice cream is good for your mental health. Remember our first episode?
What about the rhyme? You scream, I scream, we all scream. Oh my god, here come the police.
So, this is from Boston25news.com. Bob, I never know how to say this last name. I've seen it before. Dumas?
Yeah, probably. Okay. I'm sure that's how he wants you to say it.
Okay.
Versus the alternative.
So therapeutic video games help boost and regulate kids' emotional coping skills. And so they talk about this one little brat, and he's got these games that specifically, like one of the games has a beating heart graphic in the corner of the screen. John, the child, now knows to stop and take deep breaths if the heart monitor goes into the red zone. If that doesn't work, he stops playing and diverts his attention to a noisemaker. In the video that they linked, the noisemaker is it's one of those tubes that you turn upside down.
Didgeridoo?
That's like a musical instrument you play. So I think it's called like a rainmaker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like a didgeridoo.
But he has like a little no, a didgeridoo. The didgeridoo.
Why don't you blow into it?
Yeah, the didgeridoo is one of those. Yeah.
Yes.
Next podcast will just be Andrew and Sebastian making those noises the entire time.
Calming sounds to go to sleep to.
But yeah, his mother, yeah, you're right. She has a quote. It's kind of funny. You see kids at home obsessed or with a particular game and feeling that it's not a positive thing, and then seeing it used as a tool, So yeah, of course it didn't occur to her that it might be, a useful tool. Now, the only thing about this is this company, Mightier, who's Boston based, their dude Trevor Strickland, co-founder, he does say something that people always with good intentions, they say something, and I'm not sure just like how, malicious it really is. But he says, Strickland says these games teach skills as opposed to treating symptoms with medication. Quote, if you stop taking medication, you're back to baseline, end quote. And there was a very similar thing in one of the articles that we were going to link. I think it was the grief and negative coping skills article. He says, negative coping is like emotional aspirin. It numbs the pain temporarily, but once it wears off, the pain reappears.
Medical coping, as you said?
Huh?
Did you say negative coping?
Negative coping,
okay.
Yeah. And, I highlighted one area where he says that these distractions reduce emotional pain in the short term, but provide very little in the way of actual healing. And as you can see, my note says, is this so bad? So, two things here. And it's really funny because there's the parallel of medication here. And I take issue with pretty much the same point. So, one issue is basically treating symptoms with medication being put into a negative light again. Like, it's not a bad thing, people. It really isn't. I mean, if it's not for you or you're unsure about it, ask questions, do your research. I understand it might not be for everyone, but I've known a good number of people, and myself included, my non-co-host included, and my co-host included, who medication has all helped. And the medication has varied throughout our lives. I assume it has for you.
Yeah, I've taken at least half of different kinds.
Yeah, and it's basically, it's not just medication. Like I said before, I started therapy, then went on to medication and continued therapy.
It's the effort that you put in on top of that that's also going to make a big difference.
Right. So it's not, you take the medication away and you're back to baseline. No, the medication helps sort of change your baseline so that you have an easier time transitioning what will hopefully be your baseline without medication. My psychiatrist, the person I see who prescribes me the medication, has even outwardly said, the goal here is for me to see you less and less, like months in between. And if you are able to, ultimately, we will not see each other. And my therapist has even said the same thing, like the end goal here can be that we don't see each other anymore, so yeah.
I know several people who have used medication and opted eventually to go off it in their own way and seek alternative method, and they are just as happy without their medication.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, on that note, please do not just stop taking your medication suddenly. Like with any medication, I mean, this is a medication that literally messes with your brain. Do follow your doctor's orders when getting off the medication. And also, I know it looks very cool in the movies and the shows when they dump the pills down the toilet or the drain, but that's actually very harmful to the environment and animal life. Please don't do that either. Dispose of your pills responsibly. Generally, a pharmacist will be willing to do that for you.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Actually. Yeah.
But I have a anecdote for that about not quitting cold turkey your medication. It is very important to either be weaned off medically. Well, actually, that's just very important. So, or have some alternative way to go off of it that's medically supervised. And so, a few years ago, I think I was on Effexor and Celexa, or I can't remember which now, but I didn't feel like it was doing much for me. I didn't feel like it was working, so I decided to stop. Side effects were also part of the reason why. And the next couple days that followed were some of those awful days that I don't ever want to revisit. And the closest thing that I was able to liken it to was when I read the novel Junkie by William Burroughs. and how he described like a bad heroin come down or a withdrawal. It was sensitivity, major sensitivity to light, headaches, disorientation, hot sweats, cold sweats, nausea, vomiting. It was just the works, and just all of that hit me at once, and I didn't really know what was going on. So that was about 2 or 3 days of just that, and it was awful. Like, I don't want to relive that.
Now, you could have had a far different experience getting off your medication. Correct?
Oh, yeah. Like, the right way.
Right. Okay. So, and again, because I don't want people to be scared to try medication, you know.
Again, I did this incorrectly. I didn't let my doctors know. I didn't ever go back to see my doctor. It was not something I can ever or will ever want to advise. So.
Not recommended.
No.
3 out of 10.
What?
But yeah, and then the other guy's thing of emotional aspirin of short term provide very little in the way of actual healing. You'd think I'd have her name memorized at this point.
Najwa Awad.
Najwa Awad. You know, she talks about ongoing self care, and yes, you do have to think about the long term. And coping skills can definitely. I mean, they can be habitual, like my exercising, and then they can be like very quick incidental things, like
Petting a cat.
Petting a cat at work. Sometimes luckily they're okay with it. I'll just go and take a walk around the building real quick and come right back, because I can't get all dressed up in my bike gear and go for a bike ride for an hour. But basically, what I want to ask is, is that so bad? What's funny is he contradicts himself several times in this article, and I'm not sure it's entirely on purpose. He says avoidance almost always lies at the heart of negative coping. And then later on he says avoidance can be useful and adaptive. One has to engage in some degree of avoidance. And I would say, like, yeah, and maybe it wasn't intentional, but just reading the article, it really did not seem like that's what he was going for.
I guess, I haven't read the article personally, and maybe it makes more sense in the context, but I can see definitely how avoiding certain things could be adaptive, like avoiding drinking. But then,
yeah, because with the problem of drinking, one of the things that one of the coping skills I would argue that I used was distraction. Basically.
So I would say maybe you're avoiding the behavior, or you're avoiding the behavior, and at the same time the cause, the core of it, which is what you should not be doing. So, like, you can't avoid it all, but you can avoid some maladaptive behaviors of it. I don't know. Yeah.
Now, I got a list of things. I'm not going to read them all by any means, but
eggs. Well, that's my grocery list.
Strategies for good mental health wellness from mentalhealthwellnessweek.org. It is not Mental Health Wellness Week, but I guess it is.
Make every week Mental Health
Wellness Week. Yeah. What's up? And some of these things, they are things that I have practiced off and on some of them, very consistently on others. One thing I would say that's very popular for people to try meditation and relaxation techniques, which I wouldn't recommend to everyone because it can be very boring in the beginning. And sometimes you just don't click with it. Physical activity, reading is definitely one that me and my non-co-host do. Spirituality is something that I've practiced recently and taken up as well. And definitely avoid things that they list as negative coping skills like drugs, self-mutilation, sedatives, denial. And out of their 10 tips for better mental health, and this is a nice little list of things for you to look at, get inspired by. I'm going to mention 2 that I think are pretty non-obvious that have helped me out a lot sometimes. One of them is create a meaningful budget. And I know that sounds...
a financial budget?
Yeah, financial budget.
Okay.
I know that sounds funny. But, if it's one of those things that's causing, being a stressor in your life, it doesn't even have to be like a complex spreadsheet, and there's plenty of templates out there for you. But it can definitely be a peace of mind thing.
There's plenty of apps out there that do it now too.
Yeah, you know, and it puts you in control of something. It puts you in perspective of, you know, giving into your wants and desires. And definitely, you know,
you said the magic word, control.
Yeah, exactly. You know, my non-co-hosts and we've used, like I've gotten really into like end goal rewards, those things can be sometimes something that's monetary. You just have to try to keep it within reason. You know, you can't just go a week with not drinking and decide, cool, I'm going to get that 60-inch UHD TV for like $2,000.
I deserve this.
You definitely want it to be, a little bit more, what's the word I'm thinking of?
Realistic?
Well, not just realistic, but
practical?
Like appropriate in scale.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing is volunteer. And being involved in your community. Sometimes
like giving back.
Yeah, exactly. Giving back, having a little bit of a sense of purpose. It can really help. It gives you a place in the world. You feel like you're very tangibly doing something besides taking from this world. And definitely you can. That is. Again, I think create a meaningful budget and volunteer are just two things that are a little bit non-obvious when thinking of something. That
volunteering is clever because it definitely promotes also a very social component, which I think is huge in any recovery, in anyone's recovery, and it also promotes like spreading ideas. Getting in touch with others who may share similar feelings, empathy. I think that's what I'm also trying to get for, empathy. You'll realize maybe that there are people who have been or are in your situation, and you may have something to take from them, not intentionally, but in this practice of socializing with them, you connect.
Yeah.
So this deeper meaning, this deeper connection, can provide some very meaningful results.
Yeah. Oh, I should mention on the sometimes a financial reward thing. I'm not referring to retail therapy. So the financial reward in the end shouldn't be the thing that necessarily brings you happiness. It should be whatever you're practicing to attain that reward. And don't get me wrong, sometimes rewards can get you through a miserable time. But yeah, there's actually no such thing as retail therapy.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was when you said that.
Yeah, no, there's retail therapy is not really a thing. It's actually been studied, and the return on investment, in this case, literally, is extremely low and extremely short-lived, which could be argued for some coping skills. But yeah, retail therapy is more of like you're getting a high off something and can easily slip out of control.
Sounds like obsessive compulsive behavior.
Yeah, so
it happens in manic episodes of bipolar disorder.
Now what has been considered good is window licking. What's it usually
window
called?
Shopping?
Window shopping. Thank you. I think window licking is pejorative. Window shopping, because it sort of feeds that desire to see new things and like. You come into contact with them sometimes or get to look at them. I really like Wikipedia's ending note on this. Window shopping can offer some of the comforts of shopping. The advantage is that many items in many stores can be enjoyed without cost. Far more than spending would allow. The disadvantage is that one cannot acquire or keep the items. Maybe you. Have you ever heard of stealing?
5-finger discount. I should not be as giddy as I am about that. I do that way too often. One of my horrible maladaptive coping skills is when I'm slighted at restaurants or I get especially bad service, I will like steal part of the silverware or something.
That's bad.
That is very bad. I'm not promoting it, but it's something I'm probably going to cut out.
Yeah, and understand that there are some things that are borderline. Like at work, sometimes I go for a walk. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes, if something upsets me a lot, in the past, like I'd yell at people, and it's like, okay, good, you're getting your emotions out there. However, yelling at people is not considered generally a positive way of doing that, but you do get your emotions out, Sebastian. Now let's see where we could put that. And if I reach a boiling point, I will sometimes get a pallet from the back, take it outside, get one of our crossbars, and destroy the pallet. And again, that's kind of like a borderline coping skill, like arguably good, arguably bad.
They say that about actually certain sports that involve basically what would look like violence. Boxing, martial arts.
Tennis.
Oh, God, the worst of them all.
So violent.
So
we need to ban tennis people.
Balls flying in people's face. Ludicrousy is that. No, but at one point it was thought to be a good coping skill, and then it kind of got revalued, and it was questioned. Like, well, are they pounding the bag to let out their frustration? And is it actually working? Or are they pounding the bag because they cannot release enough frustration? Like, it's interesting because, like, it almost seemed to have the opposite effect for some people, where they wanted to hurt or pound the bag more because it still wasn't enough. And this was just like a transferring or a projection of how they were feeling still.
Right. And that's where I think the discussion of intentionality is very important, because when I go out there with my pallet and my crossbar, the whole idea for me is through this physical exertion, I'm not imagining anybody. I'm not making it like super personal, and whatever works for you, but this is what works for me. And I know I want to destroy something. I'm very sorry for you pallet lovers out there. I know some of them, they should be recycled. I try to choose ones that are in very poor shape. But yeah,
that fit your palate.
The idea is, I go out there and I swing it, I hit it, and at the very end of it, I'm tired, which is my desired effect, and I channel it. I intentionally channel the anger towards this inanimate object to get it out, so that I can be more clear-headed on how to approach the person. So again, it may be different if I was imagining that it was the person. Like you said, it's kind of it's transferring the anger somewhere else, but not really putting it anywhere.
Yeah.
Like for me, the whole point is to address the anger, channel it into that palette, get it out, but understand that I still have some beef with this person and I need to resolve it. So I've gotten the anger out. Now it's time to take the next step of resolving the issue with the person, and now I'm not going to yell at them or hit them with a crossbar.
Hopefully not. But no. I'll keep a lookout for that.
And I really like what Najwa Awad says about coping skills in this article, and we're approaching the end here. So the idea behind coping skills is not that they will eliminate tough emotions, but help you deal with them better.
Because let's face it, you're going to get tough emotions. Shit's going to happen. It's not about that specific emotion necessarily as it is about how you're going to handle the aftermath of that emotion.
Yeah, because it's like right before that, she says, life is difficult and stressors will continue indefinitely, which I'm just getting stressed out reading about. But, that is a fact of life,
You think that's why they added a wave?
Yes. Well, it talks about the wave is actually talking about the ebbs and flow, which my therapist has talked about too. Mm-hmm. The ebbs and flow of life. There will be times, basically, don't get trapped in that idea of thinking that you're chasing perfection or like a time when things will be very still. You're never going to have a time in your life where you will always be happy. You will always be going up. Your relationship will always be perfect. That's not going to happen unless you're wealthy enough.
That was a joke, by the way.
Was it? That's not going to happen. So what you need to understand is that life is difficult and stressors will continue indefinitely. Indefinitely meaning until you die. And you have to have a way to deal with those things, including the fact that you will die someday.
So going back to that very valuable lesson in Fight Club, learning to accept your fate.
Your life is ending 1 minute at a time. Did you say 1 second at a time or 1 minute at a time? Tyler Durden was a very flawed character.
Very much.
People. Yeah. But no, stressors will continue. It is a fact of life. And that's why we talk about coping skills, not just for, again, mentally ill people or what you would describe as mentally concerned or, dysfunctional people, but also for anyone that's not suffering from a malady. Because remember, the lack of mental illness does not mean that you're in your best mental state. And being in a poor mental state does not mean that you necessarily have a mental illness.
Yeah.
Okay, so these coping skills are for you, even if you're not diagnosed with anything.
Yeah.
They're gonna really help you. Even if your issue is just that you get mildly anxious, frustrated, or angry at certain things in life, and they start to overwhelm you.
I'm sure there's some people out there who don't even realize they're practicing coping skills, such as when they're having a bad day and they go out and do that thing they enjoy. That is practicing a coping skill without having a mental illness, or mental malady, whatever have you. And I actually do want to add one thing is I definitely encourage people to question their coping skill. And what I mean is asking themselves, is this coping skill helpful? How am I improving by this? Or how can I improve this behavior? What is it that I am getting out of it? So just ask a lot of open-ended questions about your coping skill and see what comes back. See if maybe you may need to shift things a little bit or try something new or, just see what you can do with it. You may find that you don't necessarily like some of the answers you come up with, so might be time to revisit that coping skill. Or maybe you want to take it upon yourself as a challenge to improve on those coping skills. I, for one, painting was one that I thought of myself as bad and I hated it. I didn't think I was good. And then I started to reframe it in a way that approached it more like a challenge. And I mean, I've gotten much more comfortable in my skills. I'm not expecting to open a gallery, but I think what I'm getting out of it is exactly what I need. And that's this desire to express myself.
Yeah. And if you're unsure of what your coping skills are, just take a moment to sit and reflect upon what things you do that make you happy in a constructive and progressive way. Because if you sit down and think, well, I like drinking makes me happy, remember what the outcome of that is and whether or not it's negative or positive. So
a little bit of weighing the pros and cons as well.
Exactly.
Is it worth the hangovers? Is it worth the money taken out of your account? Is it worth stressing other people out? Is it worth asking yourself, am I drinking too much?
Right. And again, they don't have to be extravagant. It could be something like gardening, or it could be something as taking care of a potted plant. It could be cycling, where I have my road bike and all my Lycra and jersey and everything like that.
Or something as cheap and easy as going for a walk.
Going for a walk, very much so. So again, don't get yourself confused with that, as far as extravagance goes. And also don't, I think Awad says it best. Your coping skills are not designed to be a dam to prevent the waves from coming. The waves being, negative emotions. But are more like your surfboard so you can ride the waves as they come.
So, I mean, that's a very good point. That's a very good quote. That's a very good breakdown. I, on the other hand, like to go the more simpler route. I like cartoons. I like watching cartoons. They're definitely a coping skill for me. And so I'm going to take a quote from Jake from Adventure Time. if you're ever concerned about your skill level of coping skills or if it works for you. Sucking at something is a first step towards being sort of good at something. Yes, it's silly, but I like it.
No, I mean it's yeah. I mean being a sucking at something means you're trying.
Everyone had to start from somewhere.
Yeah.
You didn't get to your level of cycling by not practicing. So.
Yeah, and
if walking is your thing, you didn't get there by just walking first. You had to crawl. You had to pick up the speed, pick up the pace, pick up yourself.
Yeah, and Project Mayhem didn't start like just with burning buildings and stuff. I mean, they started out small with like various fight clubs, and then eventually built up into
into a flawed metaphor.
Yeah.
Okay, so coping skills. Let us know some of your coping skills. Again, you can reach us on Twitter. Our soft machine is the handle. And we're available on just about every podcast website, app that you can get your podcast on. That sounded much more convoluted than it did in my head.
Okay, so
we do have a continuation in our series of 50 things to improve the way you live before we go. And I'll let Sebastian take care of this one. All right, take it away.
Yeah, let us know your coping skill and we'll tell you if it's right or wrong. Okay, so this one.
Number two.
A walking through...
All right, take two.
Now I got the giggles. A walking tour through New York with Amanda Burden. That seems very specific. Getting to know your city is the best done on foot. Taking the time to slow down and stroll, even after years in the city you thought you knew inside out, brings a fresh perspective. Though serendipity is often key to a fulfilling urban exploration, sometimes a helping hand, or foot, can open even more doors. And if the city of your choice is the Big Apple, there's just one woman to call on. Amanda Burden, Director of New York's Planning Commission. Straight talking, keen walking, and with some of the best insights into how today's New York came to be, a decade in City Hall has only deepened her love, knowledge, and knack for a good urban take.
For a what?
A good urban take.
Oh.
So go to New York.
Track down Amanda Burden.
Amanda Burden. Yeah, she sounds pretty.
Like she knows her stuff.
I mean, she's the director of New York's Planning Commission.
At least at the time of this.
That sounds very busy, but see if she'll make some time in her schedule to show you around New York.
And don't settle for any other Amanda.
Yeah.
Okay. We cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, take a walking tour through your city. Probably not at night and not in dangerous neighborhoods. In Houston, definitely you'll have to use a car.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you're welcome to walk, but
it's gonna take you like a while. You will not see much.
So yeah, go to New York, track her down, let us know how that goes. Or just equally as fun, take a walk around your neighborhood and let us know how that is.
Or, I mean, arguably in Houston, you've got downtown, museum district, pick an area in your city. If you live in a huge metropolis that's not quite as, condensed, there's a bit of urban sprawl, pick an area in your city that's walkable, has interesting attractions around it, Because again, sometimes on the outskirts of those neighborhoods, you find things you didn't know were there.
Yeah. And if you hear gunshots, run away, not towards.
Unless it's the police. Well, you know what? Yeah, just run away from gunshots.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. All of our episodes, like I said, are on just about wherever podcasts are available. Podbean is going to be our home station. And feel free to reach out to us. Questions, comments, concerns, whatever have you.
Also, remember today that we were talking about coping skills, which will help you with times that are overwhelming in your life. However, They are not a replacement for treatment, especially in very serious or dangerous situations. And for those, I'd like you to keep something in mind with this message.
If you or someone you know needs help, call 1-800-273-8255 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can also text HOME to 741-741 for the free 24-hour support from the Crisis Text Line. Outside of the U.S., please visit the International Association for Suicide Prevention for a database of resources.
Thanks, Sebastian. Or rather, not Sebastian.
Yeah, I had someone re-record. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Sebastian's not co-host. Take those words to heart if you ever need to. All right. This is us signing off. Till the next time, I'm Andrew.
I'm Sebastian.
Be well.
I'm still thinking of a sign-off.